Episode 228 of the Bevan James Eyles Show, How to Thrive with Exercise. Rightio team, welcome along to episode 228 of the Bevan James Eyles Show, your fortnightly podcast on the behaviours that create a lifetime love of fitness, so you can get all the benefits that come alongside it. It's a Bevan show this week. It's a show where I just talk about something I want to talk about. There are no guests, there's no superstar person who's bringing stuff in. It's just good old Bev having a bit of a chat to you about something I've been thinking about. And today's show I'm actually going to be using, I've probably talked a little bit about this framework on the show, but I want to go a little bit deeper into the framework. And when I wrote my book, which looks like it's going to be coming out in June, it looks like it's because printing, apparently, in this world we're living in right now, is a little bit of an issue. So the print's probably going to take till June. So about June, we're going to see this book come out. But in the book, I came up with a concept, which I think is not really a big concept I go deeply into in the book. So I thought, actually, it's probably cool to do a bit of a podcast on that. So it's basically how to thrive with exercise. And this isn't just, how to exercise or find the basic routine. This is that kind of get to that place where you absolutely just love exercise. So just how to thrive with exercise. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about other stuff. The only thing I want to say is make sure you've got silly fun in your life. This is the bit before the main gist of the show. If you're in New Zealand or in Australia, or maybe, I don't know if it's on Netflix and other places in the world, but on Netflix recently, they've had this brilliant documentary called Old People's Home for 4-Year-Olds. I think it's something like that. And what they do in this documentary is, in Australia, I think in some of the Scandinavian countries, what they do is rest homes have a component where childcare is a part of it as well. So literally you have 3 to 5 year olds, maybe 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5, I can't remember the exact age, living with people or going to preschool, but the preschool involves elderly people who are in rest homes. And it seems to be quite a successful way of doing things in these Scandinavian countries. And so this documentary is based in Australia, where they want to do a trial to see if it's beneficial for both the children and the elderly people in the rest homes, to see if this interaction could be good for both. Now, it turns out to be overwhelmingly successful, not just for the elderly people, it's massive for the elderly people. It's actually quite scary when you looked at some of the things they talked about. I can't remember the exact figures, but something like 40% of people in rest homes in Australia never get a visitor. A lot of them end up just sitting in their rooms all day long. So it becomes this very lonely, non-active, and very isolating experience. And so a lot of them are very physically limited, have depression or mild levels of depression, and so on. And what happens in this series is, by the end of it, pretty much all the elderly people, there was one guy who didn't make massive gains, but he had an operation, so he kind of really didn't participate, and you get the feeling that if he was a part of it, he would have got a lot more gains out of it. But all of them, their mobility increased massively. Their mental health improved massively. Just the gains were massive, but also it was very valuable for the children as well. And it was great. It was I highly recommend it brings tears to your eyes. And it's one of those documentaries which is, it's trying to point a spotlight on a big problem of how do we involve elderly people and make that last part of their life still really physically and mentally healthy. But it's also one of those documentaries that, as you're watching it, it just reinforces some of the basics of life. Being with people is a really important thing. Maintaining movement, challenging yourself. One of the beautiful things about the documentary is these children don't care if old people don't want to do things. And there's this one, basically what happens is there's this, each child kind of attaches to one of the elderly people. And there's this one guy who, when he started, he was waiting for death. He was cynical, he was depressed, he didn't really see the point. And there's this kid, his name was Eric, I can't remember the kid's name, but the kid was always saying, "Come on, Eric, come on." And the kid would get him up going for walks and get him playing in games. And by the end of it, this guy's life had transformed. And this is the thing about the show. It reinforced many of the good things we know we should be doing in our everyday life. And that's was really valuable. But one of the things that was really reinforced, which is really important for all of us to remember, is to have silly fun. And they actually looked at, because in the show what they were doing is they were kind of showing you these things that they're doing, and psychologists were kind of coming on and talking about the benefit of different things. And one day they got all the kids to bring dress-up outfits, and all the older people had to get dressed up. And at first some of them were pretty resistant, but by the end of it, the laughter in the room was just health. Like the laughter was health. And it just really reinforced that having silly fun is actually an aspect of a healthy human life. And there's two examples I want to share around this from my own experience right now. So one thing is me as a fitness instructor. Now, as a fitness instructor, I think if you were to ask people what are my strengths, I'd say he's good with people. I've always loved being with people. He can take me to a place I can't get to by myself. Like I know how to push people and get them to a place where they possibly couldn't get to by themselves. So I have the ability to bring the best out of the physical workout in other people. But also, there's a bit of a stupid energy to it. There's a stupid fun energy to it. And as much as I can take people to those other places and I make people feel special that they're part of my environment, to me, one of my biggest valuable parts of what I do is that ability just to make people have stupid laughs. Like I have people say to me, you get me to do things in your classes that I would never, ever do by myself. And that's because I just create this environment where we're going to have a laugh, we are going to be stupid, and it's actually a bit of part of the experience. So that's one thing with the environment I create. But a better example of that is, obviously, I've been talking recently about how my wife, Jo, her father's been sick, and unfortunately, in the last few weeks, we lost her father, and it's I've got to be admit, it's horrific. He was a great man, oh, what a great man. An example of how to live a life. Like he understood the important things. So, community, like even to the end, he was involved with his bowls community. He was the leader in the club. And at his funeral, throughout his whole life, he'd always been in communities and been a community leader. He knew to have fun. He always had this thing about Ken. His name was Ken. The thing about Ken is he always had this amazing curiosity about life. And how like kids have this curiosity, and it's like he never lost that curiosity. And the things he was passionate about, you could just, like, I always think one of the most attractive things in life is just the ability to be passionate. And Ken was, there was just this passion in the way he lived his life. He was also this kind of person who, I always hope that I'm the kind of person that when you spend time with me, your life is better. And Ken was one of those people. He was one of those people who just, if you got time with him, life was just better. And great family man, like his whole family, like his daughters are obviously a married Joe, but Joe's, just beautiful family, a great life. And it's extremely sad that we've lost him. And I've got to admit, my wife, Joe, it's hard. Like it's hard. It's really, because she loved her dad and she was very close to her dad, and the way he went, it was, he was 77, but he was a guy you thought would live into 100. And it was kind of, brain tumor was, he wasn't an unhealthy liver. So it's been tough. And the moments, when you're grieving, it's this kind of emotional roller coaster where you can't see the terrain in front of you, where you might be thinking you're getting through today okay, and then just something hits you. And so Joe's going through that right now, because it's it's 2 weeks, and it's going to take a lot of time for her to get to a place where, I don't know, where she's processed this. But last night we went to our friend's house. We caught up some friends, the Haycocks and the Taylors, and we're sitting there and we're playing some games, and we're stupid. We're a stupid bunch of friends. We say stupid stuff. We're a bit edgy, and we're just having silly fun. And there's this moment where Joe's just almost crying with laughter, and in this time, which is such a tough moment in her life. Oh, my reminder goes off there. In this tough moment in her life, this silliness is actually a really important thing. Because one of the things about grieving is you need moments of escape. And there's many ways to escape, like exercise, like communicating, like self-expression, like, being in nature, all these healthy ways to self-express. But actually just having some silly fun is a really important thing. And as I was sitting there with my friends last night, and I will value time with any of my friends in my life, I just thought, wow, this is such a valuable moment in our life. And so when we think about how we're living our life, is where's the silly fun in your life? Where in your own life, as you reflect upon your own life, have you got enough of that? And if not, how do you put yourself in there? And there's probably a couple of things to think about with this, is are you going to environments that encourage it? Like, I've talked about myself as a fitness instructor. Do you go to environments where someone's creating that silly fun for you? But also, do you allow yourself to step toward it? Because a lot of times people, when there's opportunities just to have a bit of silly fun, they sit on the sidelines. And, to me, one of the greatest traits you can have within yourself is the ability to just be able to laugh at yourself. And so I just think this is a really important thing to think about. Often when we talk about having a healthy life, we do think of the obvious things, good sleep, good nutrition, movement, connection, and so on. But actually just having fun, and having a laugh, being silly, being an idiot. And if you could watch that documentary, and again, I highly recommend you watch that documentary, you'll see the value of that time in your life. So before we get into the main just to show, that's what I want to reinforce first of all is, where's the silly fun in your life? And if you're nailing it, keep it up and put those people around you. And if you're not, how do you bring it back into your life? How do you go to environments? How do you be this person who moves towards it? Because I guarantee when you do, you'll feel your life's in a much better place. Now, I want to say a big thank you to all the patrons of the show. So patrons of the show, basically what a patron is someone who basically just donates a little bit of their hard-earned money my way each time I release an episode of the show. And it really helps, actually. I've got to be honest, it really helps because it just, A, it supports me financially, B, it actually means a lot that people would actually do that for me, and C, it basically pays for all the costs of the show. So if you want to become a patron, you go to my website, bevanjameseyles.com, you click on podcast, click on support me. It takes you to Patreon, and Patreon is this website that basically looks after your patrons for you. You donate as little as much as you want each episode, and that's all that happens. Each time I release an episode, you donate a little bit of your hard-earned money my way. So, and when you become a patron, you get a cool nickname, and these are some of the people who are patrons. Brittany, the Mystic McKitchen, we've got Greg, the Python Crowley, we've got Luke Mayhem Miller, we've got Poop, the Silent Assassin Langford, we've got Kate, the Perfect One Southern, and Robbie Big Shot Allen. So if you want to become a patron of the show and you enjoy what I do, please just go through that process. Anyway, let's get into the main gist of the show. So as I was saying earlier, my new book is coming out in June. Pretty excited about it. The text is all done now. We're working on the cover. Covers are hard, I tell you. Covers are really hard to get. The book is called, wait a second, what have I actually called the book? I've called the book, at this stage, it's not set in stone, but let me pull it up here. The book is called I Will Make You Passionate About Exercise. How to go from being unmotivated, unfit, and lost to having energy, being fit and healthy, and loving exercise. Now, in this book is designed for somebody who's not exercising, and I go through 10, basically the way I've done the book is that there's 10 steps, and each step starts off with a story that's leading to a lesson, and then there's kind of a baby step, and a baby step is the key lesson from that story or for that step. And then what I do is there's kind of 10 challenges you need to achieve, and the challenges start very basic, and they're kind of growing you towards a place where you're going to love exercise forever. And once I introduce the challenge, and I give you the rules for the challenge, the strategies, mindsets, and a bit of a workbook plan for it. So you can actually I want this book to be a book that, you actually, it's almost like a textbook that you read, you learn the lessons, and then you go through the experience. Once you achieve the first challenge, you move on to the next challenge. Now later on, some of the later challenges, one of the last challenges or the last baby steps is all around you taking ownership of your fitness identity. And what I mean by this is that there's a lot, what I ultimately are trying to get people to in this book is a place where they see themselves 100% within themselves as a person who loves exercise, as a person who, for me, I'm an exerciser. Like today, in 2 hours from now, I'm going to go to the gym and go do a workout because I'm an exerciser. And when I'm an exerciser, there's behaviors and actions and identity that sits on top of that. And as people work through the journey of this book, when they get to that stage, I'm trying to make sure they put a stamp on the fact that they are an exerciser. And there's a few concepts and ideas that I kind of put through at this stage of their journey because I really want them to see me there. Because basically, why is that important? Well, because when you have an identity in something, when you're not doing, you feel dissonance. So, for example, if I missed 3 days of exercise, which I don't think I've done in over 25 years, but if I were, I would feel something's wrong. And that's a good thing to have in my life because it means I don't miss exercise. And I use it as a cue to say, actually, Bev, you need to get back to exercise. So that's what I'm trying to get people to. And again, I use lots of concepts and strategies and rules and all this to help people deepen that connection as they're moving through this journey. And one of the concepts I talk about in the book, and I'm pretty sure I've probably talked about this on a podcast, but I want to go deeper into one aspect of it today. So one of the concepts I talked about in this book is the 4 types of exercises. So let's talk about the 4 types of exercises. To me, there's 4 types of exercises. Now, like all kind of models, I'm sure we could argue there's more than 4, but this is a basic way of putting it. The first one is the person who's just not exercising at all. This is the person who has fallen away from exercise or hasn't had exercise in their life for a long time, probably unfit, probably think they don't like exercise, maybe have tried but had a really unpleasant experience with it, so it reinforces that they can't do it, and really doesn't even have exercise in their life. Now, unfortunately, there is a lot of people, and I'm going to be honest, this book, that's my main target market. That's the market I really want to help. These are the people I want to get from, to a place where they are loving exercise in their life, not just, having a moment of exercise. And that's the real key with my book is I don't want it to be a moment of exercise. I want it to be a lifetime love. That basically means that for the rest of your life, you're going to have exercise in it. So that's the first type of exerciser. And then we have what I call the yo-yo exerciser. And this is the person who sometimes has it in their life and sometimes doesn't, it's that kind of, they might have a moment where they do a 12-week challenge and they do really well in that period and they love it and it goes really well. And then after 12 weeks, they fall back to not exercising and maybe for the next 9 months or next year or so, that doesn't happen. And then, then they get back into it again and, and then they change their job and they, their situation changes and so on and so on. Many people are in this position. And when I talk to people in general about this model that I talk about, a lot of people will say, oh, you're talking about me there. And so the yo-yo person is that person who sometimes has it and sometimes doesn't have it. And these people often have similar kind of results to those who don't exercise. There's a cost to their health and fitness because they aren't exercising consistently and regularly in their life. So they kind of have these peaks and valleys. The peaks where they actually do lose some weight, feel energetic, get all the benefits of exercise. But then they fall away from it. And unfortunately for these people, the sad thing is that it's often a really beat up stage because they kind of know that sometimes they can get there and sometimes they can't. So they kind of self-identify in a place which isn't that healthy for themselves. Now I've got to admit, the book's also pretty much for these people as well. So the target market of I Will Make You Passionate About Exercise is non-exercisers and yo-yo people. The third type of person within the model is the habit exerciser. Now, when I talk about the habit exerciser, it can sometimes sound a little bit negative, and I really don't mean it in any negative way. But the habit exerciser is the person who has a habit of exercise in their life, but often aren't creating a huge amount of change. Now, I've worked in fitness for over 23 years, I think. That's a long time I've worked in fitness. And we see a lot of these people. And these people are people who come to the gym 4 times a week, 3 times a week, whatever it is. They do their workouts. And you know what? I'm not going to crap on these people. If that's the standard you're at, that's good enough. But unfortunately, one of the downfalls of these people is they often don't get any change. They often get stuck in a routine. They might do the same classes week in, week out forever. They might do the same workout within the weights room over and over again. The intensity they have within the workout is maybe not that next level. It's not to say they don't work hard, because I know that a lot of people who are regular exercisers at my classes, they work hard. But maybe it's just not that place where it's a bit scary, if you know what I mean. So the habit exerciser is, you know what, at a minimal is where I want people to get. It's that place where you've got a good, healthy routine where health and fitness is a part of your life. And that to me is kind of like, I remember when I was younger, I had a coach in volleyball, and he said there's a thing called a must serve. And a must serve is when you're playing a big game, there's a serve where you must get the ball inside the other team's section of the court. And because, you know, at a minimum, that's what you've got to do. Now, you can do a more aggressive serve and try to be aggressive and attack it, but you must get that ball in. And to me, that's kind of the habit exerciser is the must serve of exercise. At a minimal, we want you to be at the habit. But the fourth level is the thriver. This is the person who is getting the absolute maximum out of exercise. This is the person who is, that word thriving, they are growing, they're stretched, but they're stretched in a way that's really empowering. It's that place where you know when you're growing in life, and you're growing in really powerful ways, and what happens is you see possibility in other areas of your life. And that's what this is. That's that place where you're thriving, and you see possibility. You see results. You know, you see yourself getting better. You overcome. You build character. You learn. You know what I mean. It's just that place where it's just everything's the best of exercise. Now, I'll be honest. Not many people, and probably no one really, stays in thriving all the time. No one really stays in thriving all the time. What most people who are exercisers will do, or a lot of people who get to thriving, is they'll have habit and thriving. So, you know, again, at a minimum, habit's what we want. But also what we want is experience of thriving. And it might be that within a year, you know, it might be that you have, you know, if you are a regular exerciser, where do you sit within the scale? But, you know, there'll be a percentage of habit and percentage of thriving. And ideally, we want probably the percentage to be more tilted towards the thriving part of exercise. And, you know, and there will be periods of habit. So it might be like, I might be training for a big, hard running race, and it's taking me to a place where I'm thriving. And then for a couple of months after that, I might just go back to the habit of exercise. But then what I want to do is I want to reassess and then bring another period of thriving back in. And that's what we're trying to think about here. So that's the model. The model is not exercising, the yo-yo, the habit, and the thriver. And what I'm talking about is how do we get more people to the thriving, and how do you spend more time in thriving in the period of a year of exercise? And again, I don't think anyone's going to spend a whole year thriving all the time. So if we think of percentage of habit and thriving, what creates the conditions where you're spending more time in your thriving place? And today, in today's show, what I want to do is just to think about what are the conditions that create a thriving environment for somebody with exercise. So I've written down some just words that I'm going to talk about here. So the first thing I think is they've got to find a movement. And I think this is really important. I think you've got to find a movement that you enjoy. I think, you know, when we think about other aspects that create a thriving environment, there are many aspects, but finding a movement that you enjoy is really, really important. Movement is such a natural human thing. And some movements you're not going to like. You know, some movements just aren't going to do it for people. At the same time, some movements you're going to fall in love with. And so when we think about the person who's thriving, is they've often found a movement that their physical self really connects with. You know, you think of top sports stars, and I think of Richie McCaw, who's, you know, arguably the greatest rugby player of all time. And he talks about that the moment he's looking for is that moment of just true expression through rugby. Now, you wouldn't think of rugby as an expressive movement, would you? You'd think, well, expressive dance is a way of doing expressive movement, but of course it is. You know, you're expressing emotion when you're playing rugby, you know, and that's what we're looking for, is what kind of movement do you love doing? Like, for example, I'll admit right now I'm spending a bit more time in the weights room because I'm just, you know, post my operation, I wanted to spend a good period of time getting stronger. And for the last 4 months, haven't missed a session. I've really nailed getting into the weights room. I don't love it. It's not a movement I absolutely love. I think it's really important right now. And I'm creating conditions where I'm enjoying it a lot more. I don't think I've created the environment where I love it a lot yet. And I think there's be some steps that I need to do to create that. Whereas for me to get out and run in nature, that's a movement I am just aligned to. Like for me to go for a run in a trail, OMG, that's me. Like I know I was speaking to one of my runners yesterday actually, and she comes and does a running group, but she also does Zumba each week, and she said she just loves, being able to dance and do Zumba when she's doing her Zumba classes. So I think one of the first things we're going to think about in creating thriving through exercise is to find a movement that you feel connected to. The second thing is there's got to be an environment involved with it. There's got to be a community, an environment, coaches, there's got to be. It's not that you can't get to thriving by yourself, but when we think about the easiest way to get to thriving, like I think of there's an athlete called Bevan Doherty. Bevan Doherty was, one of the great triathletes of all time. He won 2 Olympic medals. I think he won a world championship in his time. And Bevan Doherty was tough. Like, this guy was tough. Like I often think, when you look at athletes, some people just have natural ability, and some people are tough. And you think if you're going to go into war with somebody, who would you want standing beside you, the guy with natural ability or the tough guy? And if I'm going to a fight, I want Bevan Doherty on my side. And there's a great YouTube clip of Bevan Doherty at the New Plymouth Triathlon, coming into the finishing chute, like 500 meters to go, and he's like well back on the guy who's winning. And he puts the foot down. The guy who's winning looks behind and sees him coming in sprints, and Bevan just hurt. He's just hurting to get this win, and he wants it so much, and he's so tough, and he gets it. Now with Bevan Doherty, his one thing about Bevan Doherty, and I got to talk to Bevan a few times through podcasts, and one of John on my other podcast is good friends of his. So I've spoken to Bevan a few times over the years, and Bevan always trained by himself. Like he never trained in environments, and that shows the character of the guy. Because I've got to be honest, when I'm in an environment, I get better out of myself. When I was doing Ironman, if I went for a bike ride with a group of people, I trained harder than I could ever train by myself. And it's not that I can't train hard by myself, but you put me around other people, a bit of competitive edge in there, people driving you forward. I went to places I couldn't go to by myself. And that's like with my running business, that's why I've created a team training environment, because I just believe that you can do it by yourself. Now, Bevan Doherty, he could do it by himself. Now, some people can do that. But when we think of percentage chance of success, getting to an environment where your movement is in a thriving, where it's pushing you along. And it's interesting, I talk about how with my weights, I haven't quite got there yet. And I think one of my next steps in the next few months will be, I need to go into an environment where weights training is a group training environment. Now, I admit, there's some environments in my local area which are like that, where you're basically going in with, there's going to be 20 people kind of doing a weights workout. It's group training, but it's in a weight workout. Now, I think that will be my next move over the next period of time, because I know that environment will take me to a place where I'm going to push myself harder than I can by myself in the weights room. So when we think about thriving with exercise, you've got to go to an environment, or at least the best chance of thriving is go to an environment that creates that for you, that draws that out of you. Now, it might be group fitness classes. It might be just other people to train with. You might have, let's say you like running. It might be just finding a few people with similar ability to run with. Now, when we think about the environment, it's really important we think about it's an environment that's designed to help people thrive. It's an environment that does have expectations to bring the best out of you. It's an environment that's asking you to grow. It's an environment that, where the leaders have the ability to help you grow. I think that's really important. But to me, one of the easiest way to thrive is to look for an environment that will help you thrive. And I'll be honest, that's what I was kind of saying before, wasn't it? Like with my weights room, I'm having a bit of a solo experience. I have got a training partner 1 day a week. But I know that once I go to the environment, which will probably happen in the next few months, that's when my weights training will go to the next level. So that's something to think about. The next thing is you need a challenging growth journey. And this is really important. Call it a goal. You need a challenging goal. And when we think about a challenging goal, the challenging goal needs to be stimulating for you. And when we think about thriving, we're trying to find a stimulus that is, this is really important. You've got to find a stimulus that is so appealing to you. You know, like I remember when I did my first marathon, I think I ran 2:48, you know, and I was just this fitness guy. I never ran a marathon in my life. I turned up to this marathon, did 2:48, which is, you know, a pretty good time for, you know, I think I probably got 20th in the marathon or in the top, I don't know, maybe 50 in the marathon. You know, it was a pretty good time for a guy who just turns up and does this marathon. But I wasn't challenged by it. I remember someone said to me, my physio at the time said to me, you want to be challenged, mate? You got to do an Ironman. And he talked about, and my physio at the time was this guy, and he spoke passionately about, guys who do Ironman, they're tough. So like the ultimate challenge. And that was a spark, you know, and that's what you've got to look for when you find about your stimulus, the goal. The goal needs to be a goal that, it's that kind of like, if I become this person, like if I become an Ironman, imagine. Or if I could become a grade 3 dancer, or if I could become whatever it is for you. You know, think about the movement, think about the environment, and then think about that thing of, if I you know, that spark that you ultimately want to come towards. Now, one thing when we think about stimulus, it also needs to be a stimulus that can happen for where you are in your journey. So it does need to be a little bit realistic, because unfortunately what a lot of people do when they try to find a stimulus for a goal is sometimes they just aim too high, and the pathway from day one is a failing pathway. So sometimes when we think about stimulus, it might be, like, let's say you'd love to run a marathon, and that would be the ultimate goal, but you're currently not running right now. Well, the stimulus kind of journey might be, I want to run a marathon 2 years from now. And within that, there's some stepping stone goals along the way. So you still got that stimulus, and it might be, in 2 years, I'm going to do the New York Marathon. Now that's one of those goals. You know, New York or the London or the Berlin, those big city marathons. Or you know, I obviously talk about running a lot, but all movements have their thing. You know, do the CrossFit Games. You know, and with thriving environments, you do want to find a movement that has those landmark goals or those landmark things to achieve. And in my book, you know, because I'm trying to obviously take someone through a fitness journey, and I am trying to get them find their first fitness goal. And when I help them find their movement, I say, we want you to find a movement that has landmark goals in it. Like, for example, a pump class. I teach pump. I think it's a great workout. I think it's a really good habit workout. But there's no long-term goal to achieve with it. It's not like you're going to do the pump games. And so, you know, when we think about the movement, it wants to have a movement that has some kind of grading or goal or something like that. You know, think of fighting sports. You know, the idea to say that you're a black belt. Like, how cool is that? So then, you know, finding the right challenge and the right stimulus is really important, because that's going to create that spark and that desire that sits within you. The next thing is your ability to be able to prioritize this in your life. And this is a really important thing. Now, often if you can put the conditions in place, so if you can find the right movement, the right environment, the right goal, the prioritization becomes a much easier thing to put in place. But when we get to thriving, you know, it does come, you know, it kind of becomes a little bit easier prioritization. But if you can get to that thriving place, it becomes that thing you want to be doing anyway. But I just think it's really important that when we think about it is how do I plan it into my life? And I kind of think I'm kind of flipping this one on its head, because when we think about prioritization, if we get the right thriving environment in place, you actually want to be in that place. And actually, interestingly, I'm training a guy to do an Ironman right now. And this guy he's like the easiest guy to train in the world, because whatever I write up, he's going to do. You know, and as a coach, those athletes are just easy, because, you know, you're not trying to motivate them to do the work. They just do it. And this guy he's just doing it. And he's in the thriving place. He's loving it. But one of the things we're trying to make sure he manages is his life outside of thriving, because his wife's a bit over it. And fair enough, because he's been doing a lot of training, and he's in this, you know, he's basically doing an Ironman about 6 weeks from now. So he's in that stupidly peak training where it's very life consuming. There's a cost, you know, and so his wife's probably going, what's all this cost? You know, so there's this cost to this thriving place. Now, when I talk about prioritization, if you find a thriving place, you tend to want to be there anyway. So it's not the prioritization of the exercise, it's prioritization of life outside of the exercise. And so one thing I've been talking about with this client is, okay, well, you need to be putting credits into your family bank. You need to be looking after your wife. When you're having a rest day, you've got to make sure you spend time with the kids and family, because this is really important. Like, while thriving goals are important, we don't want to damage the rest of our life. And so when we talk about prioritization, we're thinking about prioritization of the thriving goal, but of the management of your whole life when you're achieving this goal. Because unfortunately, and I saw this a lot when I was doing Ironman, a lot of people who get to thriving place with movement actually end up damaging other areas of their life. I remember I did these training camps, epic camps, and it was basically 20 high-end athletes, and all of us were single or divorced. Like, seriously, because in thriving with exercise, we just hurt the rest of our life. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. The other area to think about is your mental strategies. When we think about thriving with exercise, you're going to go to, really, because why are you thriving? Well, because often when you're thriving, you're growing. And where does growth come from? Well, growth comes from being stretched. And doesn't it? When you think about when you've developed yourself and you've grown in your life, that's because you've been stretched and challenged in really massive ways. And that's the reward of, growth. Growth is I'm getting better. Growth is I can do things I haven't been able to do in the past. Growth is I'm a higher version of myself. But the only way you get there, the other side of that, those rewards, is if you move through moments of being uncomfortable. Uncomfortable in your skill development, uncomfortable in intensity, uncomfortable, in all of these different areas. So when you think about times of thriving, one thing you've got to become great at is developing mental strategies. Visualization, preloading prep, creating environments that push you, all the strategies that I've talked about on the show over the years that you've learned within yourself, is you need to learn how to face tough moments. You need to learn how to thrive in the moments where you're going to be stretched. And also, you need to learn how to turn up to those moments. So for example, you need to know how to turn up mentally to actually be able to take on those moments, not talk yourself out of those moments. And so when you think about thriving periods, one of the biggest skills you need to develop within yourself is the ability to, I call it hitting objectives. Actually, talking about the guy I'm training for an Ironman right now, he's the perfect athlete to train because he doesn't just do, when you get a program for like an endurance sport, there's kind of levels you can achieve. So it might be the amount of training you are meant to do this week. So let's say, you've got a running program for a marathon and you're meant to run 5 times a week. Now, for some people, the struggle is to hit that. So, they struggle to do 5 sessions. They might do 3 one week, 5 the next week, 2 the next week. So the inconsistency of just doing the base, which is just a 5. But within a program, so that's often the first thing. So the first thing is, how do you get people to just be consistent of turning up and doing all the sessions they're meant to do? But the second thing is the objective of the sessions. Now, in a good marathon program, you're going to have some sessions which are easy running. Just get out the door, go for a run, keep it easy, turn your legs over. But then you're going to have other sessions that have different objectives. You might have a high intensity session. You might have a tempo session. You might have a strength session. You might have an endurance session. You might have some race-paced work. So as a coach, when I'm designing a program trying to hit different objectives around the physiology or what you need for your physical to be able to achieve the outcome we desire at the end of it. And so a lot of people will maybe do the 5 sessions a week, but they don't hit the objectives. So they do a track session where they do some really hard, high intensity training in it, but they just go along and just do an easy run. So for a lot of people, that's one of the things they don't do well. But then when you get to the high level athlete, and the guy I'm doing the Ironman for right now, I think this is what he's doing, is that he has the ability to, within a week, with all the sessions that I put together, some of them easy, some of them mid-range, and some of them extremely tough, he has the ability to turn up and hit those objectives each time. Now, this is when you're in a thriving environment. When you're in a thriving environment, you're developing your ability to step up when you need to step up. Now, this is what creates the thrive. This is what creates the reward, because when you finish those sessions, you know what it's like when you've done a hard training session and you've been scared of the training session, but you actually turn up and you nail it. How do you feel? And that's what this is about, is that the ability to actually turn up with the right attitude and actually hit the objectives or try your best. And actually interesting, going back to the guy I'm talking about for the Ironman, I've in the last couple of weeks, I've given a cycle session, which is basically him at max. And he can't quite 100% nail the session. He's trying. Effort is 100%. He's getting about 90% of it. Now, as a coach, I'm stoked with that because that means he's going to the place. If he was getting 40, 30% of it, I've designed it too hard. But if he's getting 90, and I know even when he's not quite getting that last 10%, his effort's 100%, that's great. He's nailing it. And that's what this is all about, is your ability to turn up in the right mindset to be able to face a challenge. And then when you're in the challenge, the ability to actually stay at the level that helps you get everything out of it. And I've got to be honest, that is a skill that is extremely hard to develop. But when you're thriving, that's a skill that you have. And so one of the other conditions is developing your mental plan and skills, which creates the environment that you're in. Probably another area which I haven't written down on my list here is the ability to recap and learn. I think one of the biggest lessons that we all take from life is after experiences to recap and learn. And it's actually interesting, I'm thinking about maybe doing a podcast on this, is this idea of spending more time in your day recapping and learning. And it's almost like, like I talk about my objectives, in the morning I write down my objectives for the day and I plan out my day, and it's all this kind of, what are the key things for the day and so on and so on. Well, one thing I want to start adding to my day is at the end of each moment is doing a quick recap on what I've done well and what I can learn from the last experience. Like when I do a running race, I do it. When I play live in my band, I do it. Like I do it in big key moments. But what if I did it? Like what if after every 2 hours? Because what I tend to do in my day is I tend to plan a 2-hour block of work. And then at the beginning I write down the objective for the next 2 hours, and then I stop and I do the next thing. But what if I spend a couple of minutes to go, okay, well, what did I learn from that? Surely that's pretty powerful. And in a thriving environment, that would be something you could do. So like imagine if after every session, as you're driving home or you're having a shower, you just kind of sit back and you go, what did I learn from that session? Where are the objectives within that session? And you did that often. That's going to create the thriving environment. Now, there's probably more things that I can add to this, but again, I just kind of did a quick kind of think through this before I started writing this podcast. But as you can see, do you think to yourself that if you had found a movement you loved, found an environment that really creates a thriving, growth of you within that environment? Oh, probably the last one is get a mentor. Actually, that's really important. I haven't said that. You need a mentor. You need a coach. You need a mentor. You need mentors. You need people to guide you. That's to be honest, I probably should have put a bigger emphasis on this. This is huge. If you're not investing in mentors, you're not making the wisest way forward. Seriously, you're not. Mentors or coaches or whatever, or however I'll call it mentors, so important. People who thrive use mentors. You watch a game of tennis. What's always on? You watch a game of pro tennis. What's always at a game of pro tennis? The coach watching the game. Mentors are key to your growth. So just as well. But imagine if you found the right movement, you found an environment with great mentors that brought more out of this than what you could bring by yourself. You found a challenge that created that spark in you that was like, man, imagine if I could be that person. If you learn to prioritize in your life, but also to look after the rest of your life while you're doing it. If you develop your mental planning around turning up with the right attitude and actually living and killing the moment when you're in it, and then you did a great recap every time, do you think you'd be thriving with exercise? And to me, that's what we're looking for here. Is I want as little people in this world to be in the level 1, which is not exercising. I want as little people in the world to be in level 2, which is the yo-yo person. I want at a minimum everyone in the world in the habit place. But what I want everyone to experience is that thriving place with exercise. That thriving place with exercise. That place where you are just growing in mightily powerful ways. And that's what this is all about. So just to recap, if you are an exerciser and you know you haven't really got results in a while, and you know that you're just kind of in that habit place, and I'm not going to beat you up, hey, high five. I'd rather you do that than be the yo-yo or not exercise at all. But if you are in that place, maybe it's time you spent some time doing some work around this. And I really mean it. You need to do some work. Like, this isn't just something, you'll do it. It's a plan. That's what I want to think about. So again, what do you want to think? right movement, environment with great mentors, finding a challenge that gives you that spark, prioritizing it within your life and managing your life around it, learning the mental journey of it, and then going into it. And then probably the last thing to say on top of this is, as you go through this journey of being in the thriving place, is when you finish that journey, have a moment in the habit and actually be really aware of not falling away from habit. Because unfortunately what happens, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit because it's really important. Unfortunately what happens with a lot of people is after they hit that moment of the big goal, they actually just fall completely away from exercise. So you'll see it a lot, someone will achieve like a marathon, a half marathon, or a 5K run, whatever. They'll achieve this big goal and then they just stop exercising. And a lot of people I talk to who are getting to get up to 5, they say, yeah, I did this big goal and then just life fell away. And so after a big goal moment, you always want to just go to habit for now. So let's say you run your first marathon, and it's a very consuming thing to do, and you can't maintain that much training forever. So you kind of go, I need some downtime. Well, your downtime's not stopping. Your downtime's going to the habit. So instead of running 5 times a week where you're doing your long run of up to 3 hours, you're going to a place where you're doing, 3, 4 easy runs a week, the habit level. And then after you got to the habit level for a while, then you want to find, okay, now it's time to get back to thriving. Ideally, what we want to do is within a year, spend more time in your thriving. If you can create the conditions that I've talked about today, then you'll spend more time thriving with exercise, which means you're going to grow in ways that you just can't even comprehend. And that's what this is all about. So again, if you want to be a higher level version of yourself, take on the concepts I've given you today, spend some time doing the work, and you'll be thriving with exercise, and you'll develop possibility that you can't even see right now. Rightio team, so that's today's show done and dusted. I'll have another Bevan James Eyles episode up for you really soon. One thing I want you to prepare for, I'm going to need help for my book. Now, I'm developing a marketing plan. I'm going to spend some money on it, try to get the word out there. But I need help, and I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need your help. You know what? I want, if I can ask, if you've listened to my show and you get value from my show, one thing I'm going to ask from you is when my book comes out, is that you help me spread the word. Like I often say in this podcast, spread the word. And I know most people don't. I get it. Most people kind of, like it's just, even if you think you do, not many people actually do. I get it. I'm probably the same with other podcasts. But with this book, I believe I've created something that can really help people. I really do. Like seriously, my passion is to get people moving. My passion is to get, your life is better if you're moving. And so, I'm going to do everything I can to get as many people moving through this book and this journey, but I'm going to need your help. And so around June, I'm going to ask, can you do something for me? And it might be go to a website, grab the link and send it to somebody you know. It might be do social media. And if you've ever got value from anything I do, please help me. Please. And again, you don't need to do anything right now. Although if you want to spread the word about this podcast, by all means do it. If you want to put a review on a podcatcher, by all means do it. But the most important thing is that come June, when I put this book out there, I would really love if you could help me spread the word, because this is a good audience I've got here, and it's really great. People seem to really love what I do here, and I really appreciate the feedback and how people enjoy this. But I want to help as many people as possible, and it will be a snowball effect. It will be a few people at first, and then because my idea is basically every book I sell, I put all the money back into getting more people to buy the book. Like this isn't a money making revenue for me. Like if I sell a book, I'll probably make $10 profit on a book. If I make $10 profit on a book, that's going back to buying more ads to get more people to buy the book. I'm not trying to make money. Like I've got my job, I've got my business, I'll make money from there. I want to get the word out there to get as many people moving as possible. And I think I've got the formula right with this book. So I'm going to ask you later on this year, hopefully around June, can you help me spread the word? And if you're listening right now, when it comes to that moment, it might take 20 minutes of your time to do it. Please do it. Anyway, if you do enjoy the show, you want to become a patron of the show, go to bevanjameseyles.com. That'd be really cool. Other than that, that's pretty much me done and dusted for today. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. I'll get an interview lined up for you guys. Have a wonderful couple of weeks. And as always, keep being